My name is Michelle Mason, and I'm a Policy and Operations Associate at the Institute for Innovation and Prosecution. And on behalf of the IIP, I want to thank you for joining our panel discussion on uplifting the voices of formerly incarcerated women and trans women. After this panel is over, we'll post the full video as well as additional resources on the remote panel discussion page on our website, which will be linked in the chat. To stay up to date on all of our events, please follow our socials at IIP_John J. We invite you to send questions throughout this panel. You can click the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and send questions directly to the host. At the IIP, we have adopted the practice of doing a living land acknowledgement before all of our events. This is specific to New York City, but we highly encourage all of our listeners to learn and acknowledge your local history wherever you may be. The IIP is based in New York City, which is Lenape-Hoking, the Lenape homeland. We honor all of the indigenous nations and their land with great gratitude and acknowledge the genocide and continuous displacement of indigenous peoples. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built New York City during the colonial era and beyond. We acknowledge the harm inflicted upon indigenous communities and people of color across the country, in particular, the ongoing and current harms on Black communities, which inspires our ongoing work. Now I want to turn it over to today's moderator, ShanaKay Salmon, our creative associate at the IIP.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you everyone for joining us for this important conversation on the experiences of formerly incarcerated women and trans women. For a long time, the criminal justice reform movement conversation centered around the experiences of men and often ignored the very unique challenges that women and trans women face while incarcerated and when they return home. According to the Sentencing Project, between 1980 and 2019, the number of incarcerated women grew by 700% with a growth rate that was 2 times the growth rate of men. Recent studies have also found that trans women were 13 times more likely to experience sexual violence while incarcerated than other population groups. These numbers are staggering. And to shed a light on the unique experiences of incarcerated women and trans women, we have 2 very impressive and accomplished panelists here with us today. I'd like you to meet Grace DeTrevarah, LGBT Liaison and Senior Reentry Peer and Health Facilitator at the Osborne Association, and Topeka Sam, Founder and Executive Director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. In the interest of time, you can read their full bios on the IIP website, which will be linked in the chat. To start us off, I would like both of you to please tell us a bit about your organizations and how you became involved in this work, starting with Grace.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, so glad you all can join us. I am Grace DeTrevarah of the Osborne Association. I am the LGBT Liaison and Health and Reentry Facilitator here. I came about this work while being incarcerated in a men's facility due to the political and legal work that I was doing throughout my 2 to 4 years that I was sentenced to. While there, I was able to accomplish so many things like certifications for a paralegal certification, an associate's degree in liberal arts, and other things that were able to allow me to navigate properly when I returned back to society. Once I returned back to society, I was able to, first, I was mandated to the Osborne Association as a client. And with the work that I had been doing with HIV, with reentry, and legal assistance throughout the facilities, it was a great fit for wellness and prevention here at Osborne. Thank you.
And Topeka, same question to you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, ShanaKay and Grace, for allowing me to be on in this conversation with you. My name is Topeka K. Sam, and I am the founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. Our vision is epic, and that's to end poverty and incarceration of women and girls globally. We look at the work through 2 lenses. One is direct service and sustainability, and the other is advocacy and engagement. What we do know is that we cannot advocate for ourselves, we cannot advocate for our children, we cannot advocate for our families or our communities if our basic human rights are not met, which is safe housing, access to healthy food, and equitable employment, career development, and entrepreneurial opportunities. And so we have 7 programs across our organization. Hope House Housing Angel Food Project is our food security program. We have our Pathways for Equity, which is partnering with corporations around the globe to make sure that they are giving people with convictions opportunities for second chance employment, specifically in decision-making positions. And then our engagement and advocacy work is our Faces of Women in Prison program, which is a global speakers bureau that trains women on how to use their voice, also making recommendations around policy, and also get paid as public speakers. Our voices are valued and are valuable, and so are our stories. And so often we're sharing these parts of our lives and not actually being compensated for our work. And as public speakers, which is a career, we need to be compensated as such. Also, our Epic Ambassadors work. We work at training women, both incarcerated and previously incarcerated, on how to draft and write legislation, making sure that we are leading the work in the communities where we're looking to change. Our Probation and Parole Accountability Project looks at making sure that people understand what their rights are while under surveillance, that when you are released from prison on pretrial or probation, that not only are there or should there be expectations of you as it relates to transformation of your life, but also of that of the probation officer. And we do early terminations of sentences, clemency applications, and many, many other things. And we have a few other programs that I'm not going to get into, but follow us so that you have more information. But I come to this work, obviously, through my lived experience of being incarcerated in federal prison for 3 years and understanding the differences that women, whether they were poor, white, or Black, whether they were in marginalized communities, whether they were highly educated, that when we came home, many sisters did not know where they would live. They did not know how they would survive, and they didn't know where their children were. And so for me, God told me this is what I needed to do. I am an obedient servant, and so this is what I did. Launched the organization in 2017, and now in New York, New Orleans, and scaling to 7 cities in the Caribbean this year. So lots of work to do. Happy that everyone is getting on here, and more importantly, to just really, really engage in how we can share always the experiences that we are facing while we're incarcerated, but also how we changing that through systemic change.
Thank you. And Topeka, you touched on this in your answer just a minute ago, but I want you to expound more on how the prison experience of cis women differs from that of men.
Absolutely. Well, as we know, 85% of all women who are incarcerated are mothers. And so we do not take in consideration the fact that when women go to prison, children are actually just broken from their parents, the fact that they are sent thousands of miles away from one another, and family reunification is broken, and it leaves children susceptible to foster care, state violence, street violence, sexual harm and trauma. That's one. When you're looking at conditions of confinement, prisons, I believe, were not made, or cages aren't made for humans to live in, but definitely not for women. When you think about the amount of toilet tissue that they give, the fact that they did not give us pads and tampons at no cost to us, and we actually had to draft legislation in order to change that. The fact that they're shackling women to beds during child labor, as if, that's necessary in an already traumatizing experience to your body, but then also while you're incarcerated, with no family or no community involved in that process with you. The fact that women are susceptible to rape, from guards, and that, often they say that there's relationships, but as we know, that no woman can consent to sex while they're incarcerated at all and in custody. And so those are different ways. It goes on and on. I remember talking recently about just the amount of undergarments that they issue. When I was in the county jail in Virginia, that the sisters did what they call dumpster diving. Thank God I didn't have to go through that because I had resources and was able to buy a pack or two of 3 panties for over $10. But sisters had to go into a bin and they had to choose underwear that was less soiled for them to wear. And that is, it is disgusting. I don't have any other word that I can use for that. But the fact that, we are treated, less humane, the fact that if you look at educational programming and the things that they offered in the women's facilities that I was in, it was knitting, crocheting, plastic canvassing, and beading. And none of those type of skills are skills that are transferable that will allow you to actually be in the community and transition successfully, where you can can actually be competitive in the workforce. And so, I want to give Grace some additional, additional room to share some additional experiences that she had that differ also to that of my experience while incarcerated, but experiences that I know are just as traumatic, if not more.
Yep, and that was going to be my next question to Grace, is how a trans woman's experience is different from a cis woman and a male experience in prison.
I'm going to be clear here. The only difference is due to genitals. And that's it. That's how we're seen, is because some of us still have our genitals, male genitals at that. However, from arraignment to arrest, from arrest to arraignment, all the way to sentencing, you're surrounded by men, you're guarded by men, you're disciplined by men. When you do come into contact with a female, whether it's in medical or social services or even a lawyer, there's always this contempt of reminding you of your genitals. You're almost stripped of your identity, whatever that identity may be. And because we're speaking of trans women, that is the identity that is taken from you. When, I'm listening to Topeka, and she said something about undergarments. Some trans women are on hormones and have breast augmentations, and you're stripped of a bra, you're stripped of any type of female garments from arrest. If you have any type of hair, whether it's a weave or it's braided hair or any type of style that is what they would call a security risk, they would strip you of that. So you are completely removed of everything that you hold dear to you as a woman while you're fighting or being able to do the sentence at which you were given. I will say that for me, I've just always been, I've always had faith to hold me. And when I say faith, not necessarily a spiritual one or even a religious one, I just always had faith that I can overcome. I had no idea or the pathway in which to do that, but I never let any of these things tear me down. That's not promised with a lot of people. And my sisters who are incarcerated, that doesn't come with the arrest, the arraignment, the sentencing, because you're stripped of so much. I just held on to my womanhood because it was in my head. My womanhood, our womanhood starts in our head. And the world gives us those other visuals of genitals and breast and all those other things. Womanhood started for me and most women from where you feel in your head. And when you come into contact with the correctional system, you don't have any idea or anyone to even tell these things to. You're just trying to survive. And then you have to deal with those who are on payrolls, who are staffed in these facilities. They come with their own special commentary of, there may be religious, they may be a zealot, they may be a whole lot of things. And I had to consistently just keep my head up because I knew that I was strong and I had to use this strength to get through this 4 years. So I became somewhat of an example of how you can be resilient in a place that there's nothing to be resilient for, but just breathing. You want to breathe. That's the only thing you have left is breath. They take everything from you. And when you have, as I did, I was pretty fortunate to have my name changed prior to the arrest. Instead of them actually calling me Grace, they would come to the term that they would call me by my initial. You're G. DeTrevarah. And when they could not, pronounce my last name, I became GD. Anything to strip me of any form of an identity. So I still had to uplift myself. And how did I do that? I got involved with all the programs that they had there. And that was a struggle. going to school, making sure that I spoke up for my health. And when I was able to do that, there was resistance with people who had no right to be resistant. And they did this, but I still continued. I went to school, I got the GED, I got the associate's degree, I got the paralegal certification. I did all those things to be trained for HIV so I could come home and be of service to not only hold myself up, but hold those who are in custody now and who were in custody with me. That's how I got through this. And that's not everyone's story. That is not everyone's story, and nor should it be anyone's or everyone's story.
Thank you for that. And my next question is, so we all know that women of color, specifically Black women and trans women, are disproportionately entangled in the criminal justice system, and as a result are overrepresented in prisons. To what extent do you think your experience in prison was affected by the fact that you are Black women? And whoever wants to take the question first.
Well, mine is simple, 100%. I was incarcerated because I was a Black woman. And I can say even at my sentencing, the judge said, oh, well, you seem as if you're an educated woman and have come from a great, fine family. And so because of that, I'm going to make an example. And I mean, my case was a conspiracy drug case. So there were actually no drugs. It was a federal sting operation from the government. And yet I was incarcerated and originally given 10 years, 10 months. I know I was in Virginia. It's the Fourth Circuit, which is one of the toughest circuits in the country because of racism and the things that we've seen in the Fourth Circuit and being a Commonwealth state and all of these things. So yeah, for me, 100%, mine was driven because of that.
And Grace?
I'm going to say because you look around and everything that is in charge or who's guarding you, they were not Black. And when they were Black, they were shamed that here's this trans woman in a male facility, breasts, a woman's name, educated, spoke up for herself, actually spoke up for others. It was traumatic, but again, it goes to the strength level that I had. The strength level that I had is that I brung it with me and I never knew that I would have to use it. I've always had the strength. You just never know when you had to use it. And when I was there, that's what I did. And I was able to represent so many trans women to the point where I actually was able to change policy. And one of those policies was, when you are intake in, when you come into the system and they have an intake system, they were stripping us in front of other men. And I was able to change that policy. Well, today, they now have to separate us and not put us on display to do those cavity searches and to remove us from the clothes that we may have came in with to give us the uniforms that you're ultimately going to have. That policy has changed. And when you look it up, my name is the one who wrote the class action suit. Then there were things where there were instances where I was placed in housing. I was put in a maximum security prison, and I don't have a violent history, but I was placed in a maximum security prison because someone determined by me just being trans, that was a security risk for everyone else. They didn't care about me, but on paper, it said security risk for everyone else. While placing me in these, maximum security prison, I was preyed upon. Things like a gentleman threw hot water and oil at me. I was able to sue. And at that time, when we were able to put that lawsuit in, the law had just changed, or rather the directive had changed where they had put a cap on how much you can sue for. So all I was able to get from that was $1,400, plus I had to pay the legal fees. It was just terrible, but that policy was able to change now. So when you come into New York State correctional facilities now and you are interviewed and your status is trans, now you are given housing. If you're gonna go to a maximum security facility, it usually is, you're placed in a protective custody. So it doesn't get any better, but you're not placed in general population initially. You actually have to go through a process while you're in protective custody to actually litigate yourself out of that. And then you are placed where you're supposed to on paper. But when you show up to these facilities with breast augmentation, a woman's name, now they find, this facility finds a reason from the door that you are a security risk because of your appearance. Not that you've done anything that was wrong or went against some sort of disciplinary, it's because of your appearance. So the trauma and the lack of services, you know, that you don't get because you're in protective custody, that is what had to change. And that has changed as of 2018. That even while in protective custody, you know, it may sound horrific the way I put it, but remember, before I say this, there was nothing. You were just in protective custody. Now you have access to education. You have access to medical care, not very good medical care, but you're no longer just in solitary confinement since 2017. This is the New York State policy now. So it's been very, for me, it's just been a journey that I'm just glad that there's much still to do, but it is surely not like it was 2016.
Thank you. And so my next follow-up to that, and you touched on it a little bit, Grace, and so did Topeka, is in recent years, there have been many stories about how prisons handle the healthcare needs of women and trans women. And to give the audience a sense of what that entails, what kind of access to healthcare is available to incarcerated women and trans women? I'll start with Topeka.
Well, depending on the facility that you're in, they, you know, say that some of the facilities you get the best healthcare. You know, for as far as I'm concerned, that's nonsense. You will get access to getting a checkup. For example, you will, you know, get a pap smear once a year. You'll be able to go to the dentist. But if you have any additional medical concerns, you may be approved to go out to a doctor. In my case, personally, I had uterine fibroids. And so I was given permission to go out to a doctor in Virginia. But when they took me out, they put me in a black and white jumpsuit, like from the chain gang, black boxed me, handcuffed and shackled me, and I hadn't even been convicted yet, to bring me out to the doctor, walk me through the middle of a hospital parking lot, and end up getting a surgery, a myomectomy, ultimately. When I came home, I was told the fibroid that they said they removed, there was no way they could have because it was 16 centimeters. And then I had to get a C-section to get it removed. It was as if I was 6 months pregnant by this time. It's the size of the fibroid. There are cases when women have gotten forced sterilization, they call it, full hysterectomies. There's a movie or documentary out called Belly of the Beast right now that talks about Sister Kelly's experience. She sued the Department of Corrections in California and won because they forced her to get a hysterectomy and she didn't need to. I was incarcerated with a sister who was given a double mastectomy, and she was told that she had breast cancer and found out she had no cancerous cells, was never even diagnosed with cancer. And even through my experience, when I got to federal prison from that county, I was told everything was taken care of. The fibroids had been removed. You know, they told me I had to do a uterine biopsy, which was very painful, down in a male facility first before they took me out, and still told me nothing was wrong. And as women, we know when something is wrong with our bodies. And it wasn't until, you know, medical care professional who came from outside when I was in Illinois, who touched my stomach from the outside and just like, oh my God, your fibroids are huge. that I broke down and cried, because it was like finally somebody validated something I already knew. But I was advised not to even work with her because they would have held up my release. So, you know, they unfortunately, you know, manipulate the fact that often women don't have access to a second opinion, which is, you know, some more work that we're working on at LOHM, building our own telehealth network that's allowing people who are incarcerated to get second opinions through medical care professionals that really understand and are compassionate with the needs of us as a community. And so it is difficult. You can't have family members with you during any kind of surgical procedure. So again, whether it is being shackled to a bed and having a baby, I was shackled to a bed, you know, having these fibroids removed. I was told that it was a bunch of medical students in the room with me from the guard who was actually with me videoing this through the laparoscopic myomectomy, but I never received the video. So I was kind of put up on display for students to learn what to do, yet I didn't have access to my medical records afterwards. So these are like many, many examples just in my own experience, but there are, you know, others that I know Grace will also share as well.
Grace, same question to you.
As a trans woman, you're denied gender affirming medications from the door. Even if you have the paperwork, the titles and the names and the location of where you were receiving it, this is denied upon entry. The excuse is always funding, monies, and this is special. It's never considered affirming something that you need. And when they are, it has to go through a system in the with the capital facility doctors to determine your gender affirming medications. Meaning that if I was on hormones or some gender affirming medications prior to coming to corrections, that will stop. So that allows the tartestrozone that I may have already challenged, and I have enough estrogen in me. Now I'm having problems with that now because I'm not getting that medication anymore. That's traumatic. It's almost like seeing someone go through withdrawals. Your hair comes back to your face. All those things that you may have had that you're born with as a male. But because you're a woman, you're now receiving all these things right back. And if you are one of those trans women who were not able to obtain this when you were home, you're probably not going to get it while in custody. Today, they are addressing this through litigation. It's a case-by-case matter. And then let us be clear here. Just like, you know, I'm not here to talk about, you know, the illegalness of what goes on in prison systems. But if you got a little money, women would bring in birth control pills. We would actually use birth control pills as another form of gender affirming medications. Just like you can buy something illegal drug-wise, you can also do that as well. And that's what was going on in those facilities. When it also came to if you had a mental health problem due to the taking away of your gender affirming medications, this was not looked upon, or they didn't combine the diagnosis because they're combined. They just didn't, and they still don't. It's all case by case. So and you still have to do your time while you're going through all this. So it's traumatic every step of the way.
And pulling on your mention of mental health, a majority of women who encounter the system, who are incarcerated, do have maybe undiagnosed mental health issues, or they are diagnosed, but they're not receiving the care. What does that look like in prisons, the mental health aspect?
Well, I can speak for the men's facilities, unfortunately. They have one doctor for almost 7 facilities in every module of the prison system here in New York State. Meaning that they have this little town doctor who's probably 90 years old, and he comes to this facility and he determines 40, 30, 40 files of human beings and determines yes, no, yes, no. There is no face-to-face. There is no conduit of documents that you may have had from your facility, from the street. None of that is taken into account. All your liberties are taken away for that, all of it. So being trans in a male facility and I just had 4 years. Can you imagine someone who has more? They may have came into the facilities being on gender affirming medications for 10, 20 years. You know, there's a young lady that made international news called Ashley Diamond in the state of Georgia. Obama was the first time that we had actually heard the federal government getting involved with trans issues about medication. Ashley Diamond actually was, and I have to be graphic here, Ashley Diamond came into the facility a 42D, and that was probably 2006. She is now in a training bra due to the fact of not being able to obtain her gender affirming medications. The Obama administration were able to obtain her medications and send her to a doc, but that's just one case. And we're hoping that, you know, and for those lawyers here who may be on this call here, they know this case very well. Ashley Diamond, she is the case point that we are using, that for years, many states were saying that this was going to cost a lot of money. It's less than 1%, whatever that is. So it is never even the excuses that these administrations have used, far as with medications, with surgeries, with things that you need to just live. They have made it into scare tactics for the voters to deny trans women.
And Topeka, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would just add, I think, you know, all the system is, you know, designed to keep people, you know, oppressed. And so, you know, people who had different levels of mental health issues would be all kind of treated the same. It's one size fits all, I would say. I would see, you know, they call it pill line. People would just all line up and, you know, take medication that actually had them sleep and unproductive most of the day. Some people were self-diagnosing and doctors would give them what they wanted. If you had, you know, other issues, they would tell you your mental health, physical health and wellness was being compromised because of your weight. And you needed to lose weight and or, you know, buy certain things over the counter, OTCs, which again, you know, making 5 cents an hour often inside of prison. You can't afford to buy the things that they're offering on commissary as it relates to any type of medication, more or less something that is supposed to keep you at ease. So, you know, mental health, unfortunately, is not treated, in my opinion, to people while they're incarcerated. Often it is finding community amongst your sisters and or brothers who are inside in order to build safety and safe spaces that have you to, you know, even create opportunities of healing. You know, I created a program called Overindulgence while I was inside because there were many people who did not struggle with substance misuse, but struggled in other areas, like either over sex, you know, overworking, indulging in shopping, you know, gambling, you know, selling drugs. You know, there are these different lifestyles that cause people to actually have particular behaviors. But if you were not, I guess, categorized as a person who used drugs, then it was things that they couldn't help you with. But there were still conversations that we needed to have amongst each other in order to keep ourselves safe during that process. So, you know, I think it is this conversation and many others, we understand that their prisons and jails are designed to do exactly what they're doing. They are not places of healing. They're not places to transform people or make people better. You know, the things that I've been able to accomplish in my life was based on my understanding of the women that I met. I never say prison changed me. It was the women that I met that did. And I think that, you know, when we realize that it's not going into these institutions that actually are changing our lives, but it's the opportunity to be relatable to the other sisters that you're incarcerated with, and or to be able to fight for the rights of yourself and others because you're in this type of situation actually helps us to change what's happening for each other. But it's not the jails that do it. As a matter of fact, let me just add something. I was thinking about the Shawana Vaughn bill, the post-traumatic prison stress bill, that actually talks about, you know, needing mental health treatment and putting these guidances in place because, you know, for me, I had different traumas that happened in my life, some of which were healed and which weren't, that drove me to particular behaviors that landed me in prison. However, there's things that happened while in prison that traumatized me worse. That were never healed and actually helped. And that I had to go on my own healing journey after release. And so for people who are going in through the bill, if they're able to get the type of treatment and assessments from the very beginning, and then upon release be connected to continuums of care through other organizations that are community-based organizations that focus on the needs of those who are incarcerated, like her bill, I think is something that we need to also see happen in this country.
Thank you. Grace, did you have anything to add?
When it comes to mental health, the doctors that are available are going from a text that is outdated, totally against anything that would be proactive in getting some wellness for anyone in the correctional system, never alone a trans woman. So that's how I just see mental health there. They saw mental health as a form of medicating from what I saw, in my opinion. Everyone that I saw when it came to dealing with mental health, there was no groups, there was no source of trying to get well. There was none of that. You had to find you had to go through your own journey to get to what you may even thought was wellness. So with mental health in the male facility and being a trans woman in a male facility, you had to find some form of wellness on your own, whether that was through education, exercise, doing negative things, joining gangs, joining groups that were productive far as in the prison, but absolutely brung nothing to your journey to make you susceptible to do anything great in life. So mental health in custody is a joke. It's a joke.
Thank you for that. And switching gears, kind of been touched on, I think, at the very beginning. Incarcerated women and trans women are at a high risk of experiencing sexual abuse and harassment from correctional staff. In your experience, what were the nature of their interactions between those incarcerated and staff? Whoever wants to take the question first, Topeka or Grace.
Topeka, I'll let you go because I got a lot to say about that.
Well, please you say, because I wanted to, yeah, you go ahead, Grace.
Wow. As a trans woman, there's this saying, you know, that is so draconian, and we've all heard it in movies, we've heard it in jokes, but it's nothing funny. You really do need protection because you will become a sex object, a sex disposable to anything and everything. And that's from guards, that's from, of course, other prisoners, and not, you know, I have to say this because I said this in an article and people were really concerned. Sexual contact is illegal, first of all, when you're in custody. Let's just get that straight. You ain't supposed to be having sex with nobody. But what is tolerated, or what I've seen tolerated, is that when you are a trans woman, they would place you in situations where it's already a chaotic situation. They would put you in a dorm or a tier with a bunch of guys who were highly testosterone and troubled, and hope that something happens to you to calm the nature of the facility down. This goes on. They would literally place you in places where they knew the outcome that would happen. When it comes to, the laws and the directives that were supposed to help this, it did none of that. All it did was label the victim. The perpetrator was just either given a slap on the hand by maybe going to the box for 30 days and they will be able to do it again. But I have to say something that's going to be very uncomfortable for people to hear. And that is the gangs, the religious groups, a lot of that goes on within there. It's not even a safe place in, the church and facilities, because you would have the pastors who will come from the street and come into the facilities. And then you had those parishioners, you would call it, that would prey on someone who would just wanted to come there to pray and get peace. So it's just so widespread. And I had to say that because a lot of times people assume that if you join the church or you become Muslim or you become some religious title, that's safety in that. No, it is not. No, it is not. There is no safety there. And that needs to be said, because what has been given out into the world, or what's said, or those horrible, draconian jokes that people say that it only happens to the feminine man. No, it happens to those who are available. And if you're in that church and you're available, and that young man or that old man or that man wants to do something to me, they did. And we're not going to get into what happened to me, but yes, I was attacked a couple of times, and that trauma still holds into me. I just don't carry it as much, but it's there. So the rape culture is alive and well, and it's not your typical perpetrator. It's those people who are the teacher's aide, the guy who feeds you, the guy who may sit there and read the Bible or the Quran with you. It's that. So I needed to say that, because a lot of times that narrative is never told. It's always some unknown person in the victim or the trans woman. I had to say that part. I just had to.
Thank you for sharing that, Grace. And Topeka, your thoughts on the question?
I really don't have much to add on that. I think that, you said it best first, that rape is rape is rape. And, there is no consent at all. People like to manipulate that, but there is none. I don't care if even the sister thinks that she's in a relationship with someone. The fact that someone has preyed on her in those vulnerable conditions, it's not a relationship. And so, there is rape and abuse. It happens. I do agree, whether it's in prison and it's in these different groups of volunteers and people who come in and say that they're there to support, that we see that happening even outside, right? And these different institutions, unfortunately, and so, yeah, I do not want to belabor that point nor take away from what Grace added. I think that she shared a lot. I do see a lot of questions in the Q&A. So
yeah,
I did too.
I was just about to get to, so one that a person just asked was, how can people on the outside advocate for women on the inside?
Wow.
Well, there's a few different things. One, join an organization, volunteer at an organization, like the Ladies of Hope, like Osborne Association, like many organizations that are around the country that are focusing on women. Find out what's happening to women in those states, specifically by talking to those women, right? There's Pen Pal, There's pen pal programs where you can write into women and figure out what's happening around the conditions of confinement. There's advocating around legislative advocacy for decarceration, alternatives to incarceration and changing conditions of confinement, reaching out to your local elected officials and ask them what their positions are on incarcerating people and what that looks like. You know, wherever you are finding passion and where you have a skill set at, you know, offer a volunteer programming. You know, I share knitting, crocheting, and plastic canvas is not going to get you, you know, a decent job when you come home, unless you're going to start an online boutique, and you still need resources to do that. And so, you know, the best way to do that is teach skills. You know, find opportunities to make sure that when people are coming home, that they have safe and affordable housing, that they have access to careers and employment, that they have, you know, access to education in whatever form that looks like for them. So, you know, I mean, I feel like that's the how. I think you have to tap within to think where you want to tap in at, and just do it.
I'm going to add some additions to that. Again, you get involved with organizations like the Osborne Association. You get involved with organizations like Black and Pink, that actually is an abolitionist organization that deals with people who are incarcerated with HIV and other health disparities. But more than anything, as a community, those of you who are listening to this, I would just say that as Ms. Sam said to you, join an organization, join a group, get involved and see what the transitional services are in that facility. Let your church groups or the organizations that you hold dear, bring them to the transitional services at those facilities, and see if you can actually come inside and be an ear, be an ally where we can, people's journeys will not be so traumatic, and that the stories get told and not be able to be, I'm looking for the word here, where the stories get told authentically by someone who's visiting, because I can tell you that I was raped. I can tell you that I didn't get educational services. I didn't get the things that I needed. They have a grievance system for that. However, if you are a visitor, if you are a volunteer, you can actually go to your legislators and those organizations that are out here to speak for those who are incarcerated. That is something that I value so much, because that's why I'm involved with things like Black and Pink. And then there's the organizations that prepare you to come home, like the Osborne Association. I would say, I'm gonna name some organizations because we're talking about trans women here, at least I am. I'm gonna say the Princess Janae, I'm gonna say the Brooklyn Ghost Project, I'm gonna say New York Transgender Advocacy Group. We have resources to make sure that when you come home, you're able to get a job, get some training, do those things. There's just so much available to us. And that is why at this time I can state that New York State has been, I would say they're opening up a little, where they now have the first LGBT organization in Fishkill that was started by a trans woman. So that allows us to bring the community inside the facilities and bring those resources to those trans women who are there. And hopefully the commissioner, if he's listening, or someone from, New York State DOCCS, that they would see that there's a need for an LGBT organization in the Buffalo area, in the Albany area, because it's about resources. It's about getting the services in which these women need while they're there. Because without the community coming in and checking on us and getting the reports and hearing from, I had to sneak mail out to tell people about what was going on with me and what's going on with the other trans women who are there. It will not get out because Now they're checking mail because now we have all this access and resource. But if you're a volunteer, you can come into these facilities and be of service. And that is a beginning. That's a beginning.
Speaker, did you have anything to add on how people can get involved? And I'm happy that Grace touched on the reentry question, because that was a question that I had also. So if you can cover those two, that'd be great.
I talked about my organizational Ladies of Hope Ministries because we actually provide programming and services to any person who identifies as a woman, period. I understand that there are differences, but we offer safe, beautiful housing. And we're scaling that, as I mentioned earlier. And we have had sisters in the house who are trans women. Now, we do not differentiate. If you identify as a woman, you're a woman, and that's our approach to the work. I know that I saw a question like, what do trans women need? I need all people who are being released from prison. The first thing they need is safe housing. When you think about going to college, the reason why you're able to really be productive there is because you're either living on campus and you feel safe, or you're able to have off-campus housing. And when you come back into community from school, like going away and then coming home, you have to find somewhere to live. So you can go back with your parents or somewhere else that might be safe in order you be able to focus on your career. It's the same thing. When I know people who have worked, who are veterans and in the armed forces, when they come back from deployment, they have to come back in community. They transition the same way, really, but still need, safe and affordable and beautiful housing. So that's the first thing that I would say. All of our programs, we have, like I said, our Speakers Bureau. We've had probably in each cohort, it's been at least one sister who identifies as a trans sister in our program, like, any program. So I think we should stop even siloing this issue as, what do formerly incarcerated or people need when they are released from prison. I think the idea is, what do all humans need, right, in order to be productive human beings and citizens in their community, period, irrespective to where they come from and are transitioning from. And if we stop trying to put people in boxes, as to that, I think that it will be easier for people to wrap around that, we want to have great neighbors. We want to have great neighbors who, want to live in the same conditions of safety and beauty, and that we would want for ourselves, which is why when I created Hope House, I was not putting bunk beds in there. I just was against it. I'm a grown woman. I'm not going to go on a bunk bed, nor am I going to provide that for other women coming home. They need to have their own bed, period. And I received pushback, but I wasn't doing it because it wouldn't make me feel good. Make me feel like a child and like I'm coming back from one institution into another. When I think about the resources that people need, I know when I'm home, I laugh because, when I first opened Hope House, we had a gift registry, and the sisters had a Keurig machine before I even had one myself. But we put on the registry things that we wanted in our own homes, or that we had in our own homes. Because often, people who are in different lived experiences, come from different colorful pasts, may not even have experienced some place that they feel safe about. And what I know is, when you live in a beautiful space and you can call that your sanctuary, you're able to show up in the world in a beautiful way, at peace. It's when you have all this chaos around you that you cannot do that. And so I just, ask everyone to stop, stop putting us in a box, if you will, I shop the same places. I want to live in the same communities. I work just as hard, if not harder. I pay my taxes, and I have a family that I have to provide for. And so I'm going to want the same things that you want for yourself and for your family.
Before you get to reentry, I think I'm gonna take on that question. The question here is, what do panelists feel about trans men, and should they be housed in male facilities? I'm going to try to answer that with my experience as a trans woman. Let me be clear. Corrections houses everyone due to their genitals. Now, as a trans woman, being placed in a male facility has been traumatic, and is going to consistently be traumatic until otherwise. As far as trans men, I am not a trans man, so I can't speak for trans men, but I am just going to use some common sense here. If New York State would decide to place trans women in a cisgender facility for women. I'm quite sure that they would just do their time just like everybody else. And they would go through the traumas that other cis women go through as well. I cannot say that for trans men. Do they deserve the option to have that? I'm not an official, but I will say it should be, as they, I don't like the word test because that's what it is. Just how New York State is testing in New York City on Rikers Island, they're placing detainees, you're not sentenced yet, in women facilities. Now, I'm going to say this, that has worked only here in New York City. I know for a fact that New York State is different. So that's the only example. I would say give it a try as an example. But we also have to understand that they will be placed with, as anybody would be placed, as I was placed around violent people. But understand it's genitals that is where the question comes up, far as a trans male being in a male facility. It's already unsafe in any facilities, regardless what your gender identity is. So I would say address your legislature about this. Talk to those who are in corrections and see what are their ideas. And what idea would you say the questioner, what was the questioner's name? The questioner, Kate Coleman. I'll say to you, Kate, that it's just to put people where they identify as. But understand, I was placed in a male facility due to the fact that I had male genitals, and I was still abused, attacked, raped, and still, I wouldn't say I'm okay, but I was traumatized by it. So I don't know if this is, do you want to see a trans male go through the same thing in a male facility? It's a very loaded question. It's not an easy question. And the word fair, I'll leave that to the gods, but I just don't believe that's a question that anyone on this panel can answer. I really don't.
I'm going to add to that. Not that I'm answering this question because I'm not doing that. But, I think we both, Grace, myself, and many people who I believe maybe even on this call, ShanaKay as well, would say that, there are alternatives to incarceration, period, right? And so when I'm thinking about solutions, I don't believe that people need to go to prison anyway. That is my fundamental belief. I believe that whether you are identified as a cis woman, a trans woman, anybody, I don't think that you need to go to prison. I think that we have many, many programs of alternatives. I think that, yeah, there are times that people need a timeout based on just different behaviors and things that they're going through.
When you say timeout, pardon me, Tamika, when you say timeout, are you saying, because I love the devil advocate type of thing, because
no, for sure. I'm going.
I have to do this because, again,
I'm definitely
remember that you're placed due to genitals, not my identity.
No. Hear what I'm saying though. Okay, let me just finish the thought. When I say a timeout, I mean timeout based on certain behaviors, certain things that we're able to go into other healing centers and places like that. Right. So that's my thought around that. That I don't believe that anybody should be in prison, irrespective to how you identify. Like at all. That is my fundamental belief. In addition, I believe that if you are living in whatever your identity is, right? I live as Topeka K. Sam as a woman. That's how I identify, irrespective to my gender. So therefore, legally, that's who I'm showing up as, and legally, this is the system I'm going into, right? The way the system exists now. When you look at, in my opinion, people and how they're identifying, whether they are legally on paper changed their name or not, I don't care about that. I feel like if you are living a particular lifestyle and that's how you are identifying, then you should be determined, in my opinion, to go where you feel most comfortable to go, if that's what it is. I don't think I mean, I've been incarcerated. Actually, I've never been incarcerated with a trans man or woman. I've been into prisons where there have been trans women and trans men. I feel like everyone's experience is different. But I think the solution to the problem is you don't send people to prison, period. Like that is my solution. So I can't, that's why I said I don't necessarily have an answer as to do trans men need to be with women, do trans women need to be with men? No, the solution.
But we also understand that we live in the United States and we have a system of prison. And because of that, due to that fact and that reality, of course, not all of us are abolitionists. I know I am. But at the same time, the reality of punishment of a trans male who has been sentenced, and until they've appealed it, until they've let go, corrections has to place them. And I say, as dangerous as it was and continues to be for trans women in a male facility, I would say the same would apply for the trans male.
Right, I would think so, because I mean, at the end, whether it's to your point, volunteers that are coming in, whether it's guards who are there existing, or it's other people who are there, that, you know, there is abuse that happens inside of prisons. So I think, I mean, you listen, this is one of those things that, you know, we have an opportunity to talk about this on a platform, and I think the solution is do not stop incarcerating, find ways to decarcerate, find alternatives to incarceration, even in the existing systems that we have. And that way we don't have to worry about people being further harmed, irrespective to gender identity, just further harmed as human beings in this country.
What I love is my final question, because we are a think tank focused on prosecutor reform. My final question was going to be, how can prosecutors be more proactive in mitigating the negative impacts of the legal system on women and trans women? But you answered that of alternatives to incarceration. And do you have any other thoughts of how prosecutors can be better, how prosecutors can do a better job of taking into account the impacts the system has on women and trans women?
I mean, yeah, I think that we, again, and you know, I'm going to leave space for Grace on this, but I think, you know, my stance on all this is that there's so much prosecutorial misconduct. There's so many things that prosecutors are doing just to advance their career when they have the ability, and they actually hold all the power. We know that, you know, the prosecutors hold the power. Judges do what prosecutors, for the most part, suggest that they do. And when we look at why people are being even arrested and held without bail and detained, when we're looking for why people are being incarcerated on the types of crimes that they're being incarcerated for, when we're not taking in consideration the mental health issues that people are coming in and the traumas that they face existing that are even leading them to there, this is all the prosecutors that actually have the ability to say, we're going to try something different. And so what I would say is that the prosecutors, the way to hold them accountable, first of all, we vote them in. Let's not forget that there's an electoral process as it pertains to, you know, district attorneys and other people that are actually coming in, so that we need to hold them accountable in our voting process, number one. Number two, but I think that it is important for us to also continue to push around these alternatives to incarceration, not just looking at like the drug courts and the other courts, because they also are gender biased and also racially biased as to who actually gets opportunities to go in those systems versus others. But we have to be able to say, listen, here are great programs that are actually providing alternatives that are working for communities, all communities of women that are actually entangled in the legal system, and hold them accountable to providing opportunities to these programs in order to heal while holding each other accountable.
Well, Topeka said basically a little about what I was going to say in another form. I'm just going to say that prosecutors come with an agenda once they are there, and they have to live up to that agenda. I just think us as community people, we just need to make sure who we're voting for and who we're allowing to get into the electoral process, because I don't see anything happening there other than suggesting alternatives. That's the only thing we do have left is alternatives, if they're even considered. because there are moments where you don't even, a prosecutor does not even give the defense an opportunity to even bring up alternatives. This is our sentencing laws due to this, and this. And then there's the recidivism that, you know, I know a young lady who does not have a violent history, but she has a recidivism of almost like 70 arrests, and they're all non-violent. She has a 1 to life. That means that they can play with her for the rest of her life. So again, it's about alternative. There's no other word to look for. There's no other. I can name 100 organizations and things and ideas in which we are using here at Osborne. We're using, you know, working here at Osborne as a trans woman and doing the work that I do here, you know, having trans women come from the facilities and come here and see someone like them. That means something. I gotta say this. This means something, because when you're in those facilities and you come home and you have to be mandated to Osborne, you gotta be mandated to Fortune Society or to Hope House or whoever. If you don't see someone who like you just think they're another part of the system. Even though I know it isn't true, but we have to do more hiring of people of color in those systems, in corrections, in Osborne. We need to, at Fortune Society and other organizations that do reentry work, we have to see people that those who are returning to the community, they can recognize that they know how it is. There has to be encouraged with those people who do the hiring at Osborne, who do the hiring at these reentry programs, that you not only hire those who are qualified with the letters behind their names, but you make assets for people like me who have the basics and can be of service to make sure that the recidivism and the alternatives are used before jail. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that that is a perfect place to end. I just want to, again, extend my deepest gratitude to you, Grace and Topeka, for lending your time and your experience to this conversation. And for people who want to learn more, I will definitely be posting Topeka's organization and the work that Grace does on our website. This recording will be available on our website after the panel is over. And again, I feel full, and I just thank you guys deeply.
Thank you, Topeka. I'm just so proud to have been here with you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace, and also ShanaKay. I've learned a tremendous amount, Grace, from you, so I definitely am going to be in contact with you.
Thank you.
And thank you, ShanaKay, for asking me to be a part of this. And thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been great.
Thank you as well.
Thank everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.